This Feeling by LeilahMoon. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 14. December arrived, bringing with it more snow and an avalanche of homework for the 5th years. Hermione's prefect duties were becoming increasingly onerous as Christmas approached, which meant some time with Draco, but not nearly enough. In her spare moments, she had begun planning a special evening for the two of them. It was a few days before the 25th, and Hermione had taken Draco to the 7th floor. She had asked the room of requirements to provide a cozy Christmas scene, and it had clearly taken instructions seriously, as the decorations were impeccable. Opposite a small sofa was a quietly crackling fire, which enveloped the room with warmth. A carefully adorned pine tree stood against one corner, filling the space with its refreshing scent. Leading Draco into the room, he gazed around in awe. "What is this place?" "It's called the Room of Requirement. It appears to any person in need of something, equipped for whatever that might be." Hermione smiled. "Tonight, I thought we were in need of festivity." "It's amazing." She caught his hand and laced their fingers together, pulling him towards the sofa. 2 hot chocolates appeared out of thin air as they sat down. Leaning her head against his shoulder, Hermione murmured, "I thought you deserved a surprise." "On that note," he said, handing her a slender velvet box, "I have a present for you." Her heart fluttered as he gently lifted the lid. Lying on the soft cushion insert was a delicate bracelet with one gleaming gem. The color transformed from scarlet to emerald as light shifted across the polished surface. "For us, Gryffindor and Slytherin," she smiled. "Thank you, Draco." He cupped his hand around her cheek and pressed a soft kiss onto her lips. Carefully picking up the bracelet, he encircled it around her waist and secured the clasp. Hermione's eyes flickered, suddenly hesitant, as she pulled out a small box of her own. "This is for you." The moment he saw what the box contained, Draco inhaled deeply, and she knew that he understood the significance of her gift. She wondered whether he would say anything or wait for her to mention it. "Hermione," he whispered, running his index finger over the cold silver of the cufflinks. "Are they okay?" "I love them." "I love you," he wanted to say. When Draco had purchased Hermione's bracelet, he was certain she wouldn't be aware of the meaning behind it. But could it really be just a coincidence that the item he held in his palm meant the same thing? He attempted faux innocence. "You know, Granger, some might think you were propositioning me." "Oh," she replied, deciding to play along. "In certain circles, such a personal gift might be perceived as declaring your interest in a long-term arrangement." Although she already knew this, Hermione couldn't prevent her cheeks from flushing pink. "I see," she said. "And what might these circles consider my bracelet to mean?" "An absolutely rock-solid long-term arrangement," Draco murmured into her neck, beginning to pepper her skin with kisses. "Everyone would know you were mine when they saw you wear it." She sighed as he gently sucked her pulse point before pulling her onto his lap, her legs straddling his thighs. Clasping her face with his hands, his lips captured hers. Hermione gripped his hair and poured herself into him. He gazed down at her chest, nipples erect beneath her shirt, and she pushed herself closer to him, legs spreading further apart. "You're so beautiful," he exhaled, and his eyes devoured her body. Draco fingered the hem of her shirt as he looked at her questioningly. She nodded, and his hands slipped slowly up her torso, knuckles resting beneath her breasts. Hermione's breath hitched as his fingertips teased her, grazing each taut nipple. Their kisses became more desperate, and she shifted in his lap, suddenly aware of her heat pressed against the hardness straining against his trousers. She whirled her hips again, and they both groaned. He grabbed her, turning them over. Their shirts were quickly removed, and Draco pushed her skirt towards her ribs. Breathing heavily, they lay facing each other. The sofa had expanded at some point. "God, I love this room," he panted into her neck. He slid his palms slowly down her body, exploring and kneading as he went, until he met the apex of her thighs. She stilled and looked into his eyes. They were dark, his pupils black and blown wide. Grinding against his palm to indicate what she wanted, he claimed her mouth again and moved his hand lower. No one had ever touched her there before, and she gasped. Her back arched and nippers tightened. He stroked his fingers over her sleek folds, rubbing her clit in light, gentle circles. She whimpered, and he swallowed the sound, gently sliding one finger inside her heat, allowing time for her to adjust. "Is this okay?" he murmured, and she nodded. How did you—" Draco's cheeks flared red. I've been reading some books." She gave a breathy laugh before becoming overwhelmed with sensation. Hermione felt like her whole body was on fire. Arousal drummed through her as he pumped slowly in and out, his thumb continuing its ministrations on her clit. Her head fell back, and he couldn't tear his eyes away, wanting to commit every moment to memory. "Oh, God!" she groaned, rocking against him. Carefully adding a second finger, he felt her stretch around him and wondered whether he might explode from that feeling alone. He slowly increased the pace until her hips bucked and she cried out his name. He desperately wanted to feel her come on his fingers. Hermione's eyes closed as the heat building inside her cooled tighter. Her toes curled and her thighs began to tremble. He felt her clamp down tightly on his fingers and thought he might die of happiness. Her eyelids fluttered as she came down from her high, and they stared at each other in wonder. "You're amazing," he breathed. She nipped him gently as her gaze meandered down his trousers, which were holding a now painfully swollen erection. To his surprise, she reached in to pull him free, and he shuddered as his hard length was released. Hand slipping around his shaft, she caressed the silken skin, her thumb brushing over the head while he groaned. She pumped him in her fist, watching a bead of brecum leak from the tip. "Hermione," he gasped, staring down at her small hand. "Is this okay?" she asked, nervously repeating his own question. He could barely form a coherent thought, but managed to reply, "More than." Lifting his hips to meet her hand, he twitched and she moaned, her hand moving faster. His cheeks were flushed and he was breathing heavily as he began palming her breasts. "Fuck, I can't," he said, his jaw clenching. She tightened her grip slightly as his hips rocked more erratically. "Please," she breathed into his ear. The word was his undoing, and he thrust hard, suddenly pulsing in her hand as he let himself shatter too. They lay in silence for what felt like a long time, simply taking each other in, exploring the body in front of them. Hermione eventually spoke first. "I'm yours," she said. "You know that, right?" I do. He kissed the words into her skin. "I do." "You might lose at Quidditch, Draco, but you will never lose me." He remembered their last conversation as unspoken words. How did she know? How could someone know him so deeply? "Hermione," he breathed, "I adore you." To be continued. Thank you for listening to today's chapter of This Feeling by LeilahMoon, read by LeilahMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, AO3, or Tumblr.